Hey guys, welcome back to Geeky Greenhouse. I'm Crystalline, and today I'm going to be talking all about the Begonia Maculata. So it is the dead of winter here in Connecticut, and we're not doing much gardening outdoors, so we thought we would shift gears a little bit and come inside and talk about houseplants. So this is the first video in a new series that we're doing, and I think we're going to call it Get to the Plant. So it's more like short, concise videos about different houseplants and how to care for them. So I thought this would be a really good plant to kick the series off with because it's really attractive and unique, and you may have never even heard of this plant. Or you may be here because you recently acquired one and you're looking for some care tips. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So let's get started. This is the Begonia Maculata, which is more commonly known as the polkadot begonia, the spotted begonia, and some people also call it the polkadot plant. And this is appropriately named because, as you can see, the foliage is heavily decorated with these beautiful polka dots. And the undersides of the leaves are this beautiful crimson color, and it looks gorgeous when the sunlight is shining through them on the window. So this is considered a cane begonia, and it's native to Brazil. And while it does flower, they're typically kept as houseplants and grown for their foliage, though it is really cool when they flower as well. So let's talk about lighting. What kind of lighting does this plant prefer? This plant will do really well in bright indirect light. And what does that really mean? It seems like every houseplant does really well in bright indirect light. So simply put, if you place this plant in an east or west facing window where the plant can see the sky, it'll do fine. And if you have a south-facing window, you can also set it a few feet back. It's really about finding the perfect balance and finding that perfect spot in your home for your plant. So you may need to move it, and that's totally fine. If you notice that it's getting really lanky and leggy, it may need more light. So you can just move it to a place that gets more light. And it is worth noting that if you want this plant to flower, it does need adequate light. So let's talk about soil and watering for this plant. As far as soil goes, this plant, as well as many other houseplants, really just want well-draining soil that also has really good moisture retention. So you don't want this plant to dry out completely between waterings, and you also don't want it to be sitting in soil that's too moist. The roots of this plant are really delicate and fragile, so if you have soil that's too heavy and wet, you'll run the risk of root rot. So that being said, a standard indoor potting mix is fine as long as you add a pretty generous amount of perlite or bark or something to help with the drainage. And of course, always make sure you're using a pot that has drainage holes. That's very important for this plant because it doesn't like to sit in soil that's too moist. And of course, the better draining your soil mixture is, the more frequently you're going to have to water the plant, so just keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to how often to water this plant, as it goes with any houseplant, it really depends on so many different factors. The size of the pot that the plant's in, the type of soil mixture you're using, the size of the plant itself, the temperature of your home, all of these things play a part in how frequently you're going to have to water it. So the best thing to do is to keep track of how frequently you're watering the plant and kind of try to get on a schedule that way. So depending on the size of your pot that you're using, I would let the first inch of soil dry out before watering it again, or the upper quarter or upper third of the plant, allow that to dry out before giving it a good watering. Don't be afraid of the amount of water you're using. Make sure you're really thoroughly soaking it, because if you have drainage holes, it's going to be fine. So you want to make sure all of the roots are getting saturated as opposed to just watering it a little bit here and there. And you can fertilize it about once a month during the active growing season. So if you notice the tips of the leaves turning brown and dry and crumbly, that is a sign that the plant is not getting enough water. So if you notice that, you could be underwatering your plant. The other thing that can cause that to happen really quickly with this plant is having it too close to a drafty window or a heater. And this plant actually suffered that. It was pretty close to a heating vent, and I noticed one of the leaves instantly crisping up, so I moved it to a new spot and it's been fine since. And it is true that low humidity levels can cause the leaf tips to turn brown as well, but that's not as likely to be the cause rather than underwatering or if it's near a draft. So be sure to check those other two things first. So for temperature and humidity, this plant likes to be between 65 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. I wouldn't let it drop below 60 degrees. It won't be too happy with that. Humidity, you don't really have to overthink it. It does prefer, you know, average to high humidity levels. And we have a humidifier running for us as well as our plants indoors because it's winter and we have the heat going. But you don't need to keep it in an indoor greenhouse and really overthink it. It'll do fine in average humidity in your home. So when it's time to repot this plant, which doesn't need to happen as frequently as you would think, make sure you're using a pot that's just one size bigger than the one it's in. You certainly don't need to put it in a huge pot. That being said, these plants do get really tall and you might find yourself needing to stake it with a bamboo stake or a trellis of some sort just to keep it nice and sturdy. And you can also prune this plant. Pruning is best done in the spring or the summer, but if you want to maintain kind of a bushy appearance, you can prune it. And pruning is also the perfect time to propagate it. This plant propagates really easily with stem cuttings. So I actually have a little piece here that broke off several weeks ago, and I put it in water and it's already growing roots. It's, you know, really a small piece to be used for propagation, but I'm gonna see what it does. So I forgot to mention, when the new leaves come in on this plant, they look really, really weird, almost like it's sick or something, but it's actually completely normal, and eventually they unfurl and flatten out. So don't be alarmed when you see the odd crinkly leaf shape coming in. It will flatten out and look normal. It's just kind of one of the quirks of this plant. So as far as care goes, I definitely don't consider this plant very high maintenance. It's certainly not as easy as some other houseplants to keep, but it really is a statement piece. It's really attractive and cool. And if you happen to see one in a nursery and you're thinking about buying it, you may want to make the purchase. Only because these guys tend to go pretty quickly because people see them in the nursery and they tend to sell out pretty fast. And they're usually not that expensive, so certainly don't overpay for one. It's not a rare plant, but they're really, really neat. And I think they add a lot to the home. It's the perfect way to add a little splash of color somewhere. And you know, it really gets some conversation starting when people come over. It's overall a really great plant to have. So that being said, I'm really excited for next week's plant because it has a rich history to it and it's one of my favorite plants. But I'm not gonna spoil the surprise there, you'll just have to tune in. And if you have any ideas of what we should include in this series, then certainly leave a comment below. It's new to us, we're excited to be branching out into some different areas of gardening. So let us know in the comments what you think. Thanks so much for watching, see you next time.